Carolina.
President, on Saturday, I was in Western North Carolina for the day because that marked the one-year anniversary of the landfall of Helene, and in a place that a hurricane's never really been before, about 200 miles inland, and the Smoky Mountain range. In North Carolina alone, Mr. President, it had an impact land-wise equivalent to the state of Massachusetts. About a dozen river basins were at historic 100-year flood levels, and the damage was tremendous. The loss of life, 108 people in North Carolina alone, more than 250 people by the storm. $59.6 billion in damages. It's actually the most expensive storm in North Carolina's history, breaking the previous record of $30 billion by Hurricane Florence back in 2018. 74,000 homes damaged or destroyed. 5,000 miles of roads damaged or destroyed, including major portions of I-40, which are still only one lane in each direction for about a 20-mile stretch between North Carolina and Tennessee. I-26 was damaged. Blue Ridge Parkway's just opened up. 848 bridges damaged and destroyed, 20,000 farms and 800,000 acres of timber damaged. 163 water systems damaged, with Asheville not having drinkable water for almost 2 months after the storm. Mr. President, when I was in Western North Carolina, I heard someone say that the one community that I was in was back on its feet. But for every community that's back on its feet, there's still several communities that are on its knees or flat on its back. In fact, there are some communities that we wonder whether or not they ever will come back. And the reason I talk about it, in addition to being the one-year anniversary, Mr. President, we've got real problems in the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund and resources available. The President rightfully acknowledged that there was a release of money about a month ago, but all of that is money that's already, those are reimbursements. Those are costs that have already been incurred. We haven't even gotten to a point to where we're trying to become more resilient or to prepare for the next storm. We're still, when I was riding from Old Fort to Chimney Rock, I was going down a stretch of highway, or not a stretch of highway, a stretch of state road. There are still cars in the creek beds. There are roads that are in the creek bed because they're trying to figure out where they're ultimately going to put it back on a hillside, when they can get stabilization there and actually have the funding to build the roads. I know a lot of people have moved on, Mr. President, but in Western North Carolina, we haven't moved on. We're suffering as much today as we were the day or 3 or 4 days after the storm last year. According to the latest FEMA Disaster Relief Fund monthly report, the major disasters account balance right now is at $1.4 billion. That is dangerously low. Last month, FEMA approved $7.5 billion from the major disasters account. In 2024, there were 90 FEMA-declared major disasters, nearly double the 30-year average, and 55 declarations per year, up 55 declarations per year. Already this year, and we're really ramping up in the hurricane season right now, we've had 40 major disaster declarations in 22 states. FEMA simply doesn't have the funding needed to respond to a major disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a shutdown posture right now. We have storms in the Atlantic and more storms forming off the coast of Africa, and we are not prepared for another major disaster should it hit this weekend. Nor do we have the money that we need to help communities across this country, especially in Western North Carolina, recover from Helene. The House passed continuing resolution that we tried to vote on this week had $22.5 billion for the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund. But that money's not here today because we're in a shutdown posture. We're not funding any area of government, but we're especially hurting the Disaster Relief Fund and FEMA. And the only thing standing in our way is a simple vote to continue funding at levels that my Democratic colleagues have agreed to before. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a CR that the president or that the majority leader has decorated with ornaments. We call it like decorate some of these spending bills like a Christmas tree. This is a simple, continuing resolution to spend at the level we were spending yesterday. There's nothing more to it. There's money in here to help with disaster relief, but there's nothing more. This shutdown is hurting people in North Carolina. This shutdown will hurt more people. When Al lost the season last year in the tourist season to the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Great Smoky Mountain Parks, that was a hurricane. That was an inland hurricane, a disaster. This year, it's the disastrous vote of the Democrats not allowing us to continue to fund at the levels that we did yesterday. We're not asking for anything more than that. We're asking for time to negotiate the premium tax credits, the ACA credits that I'm on record as saying we do need to find a good place for that. It's not about canceling them. But folks, we can't even get to that if we can't agree to something as basic as can we spend today what we did yesterday? And I know that there are several members on the other side of the aisle that would like to move with a clean CR and get to that negotiation. And I'm just speaking on behalf of people in North Carolina, particularly Western North Carolina, that are struggling mightily. I hope that we can get back to funding the government, that we can plus up the disaster relief fund, and that I won't have to come to the floor next week to see who's going to be against this unanimous consent for doing just that. Let's do our job. Let's get back in business. Let's get the government funded, and let's help the people in North Carolina and dozens of disaster-declared places all across this country. Thank you, Mr. President.